again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Pretty good topic today. Let's find out. What nearly killed you, and how did you survive? Not safe for work, not too bad. Please remember to like, share, say hello, and subscribe. When I was a kid, I got a BB gun for Christmas. That summer, my dad told me specifically, don't shoot the beehive in the backyard. Well, I was about 11 years old, so I shot the beehive in the backyard. That day I found out I was allergic to bees. I think our proximity to the hospital probably saved my life. Infection in my lungs, my old cat, and a prototype. Eons ago, I was finally falling asleep after being sick for a while with what I was told was bronchitis. My cat started howling to be let in and annoyed me enough to get out of bed. I nearly blacked out with the effort of opening the back door for her. I fell to my knees and puked blood and bile all over the cat. The cat made such an unholy racket that it woke everyone up in my house, my neighbor's house, and the old lady across the street. The next thing I remember, I'm in intensive care. It was not bronchitis, and I was pretty far gone by this point, as the meds I were on were basically useless. Had I fallen asleep, I would have died within minutes. Well, to make matters worse, the things they were trying to treat it with weren't working that well, so they said F it, and gave me a drug which was being tested at the time. Don't recall the name. Yeah, my squatter cat and a science experiment saved me. Severe DTs from alcohol withdrawal. I was a full-blown alcoholic for 7 years at 26 years old. My fiance had moved out due to my excessive drinking and pharmaceutical abuse. We broke up a month later. I had already graduated from beer to whiskey about 6 months prior to the breakup and developed an opiate dependence. Anyway, after she moved out, I lost my job and got a DUI. Unemployed, alone, and without a driver's license, I really hit the whiskey hard. I'd go through a handle every 2 days. If I was awake, I was drinking. This went on for another 6 to 7 months after the breakup. So I eventually ran out of money, dead broke. I knew nothing about the danger of alcohol withdrawal or the misery and terror I was about to experience over the next week. So it was a Friday when I woke up completely broke, out of booze, and not a pill to be found. I was restless, irritable, and discontent to say the least. Saturday, I couldn't get out of bed and was having super fever-like dreams where I would doze off and wake up repeatedly, and was having a hard time differentiating what was real and what was a dream. I called my mom and asked her to come get me. She picked me up and brought me back to her house. She knew how much I'd been drinking and said I would feel like shit for 4 to 5 days while I got it out of my system. Saturday night, I tried to sleep, but the severe anxiety, sweating, tossing, turning, sheet kicking, and vivid fever-like dreams if I did manage to doze off. Sunday is pretty much a blur, and I don't remember much of the day, but I'll never forget that night. I remember forcing myself to take a shower because it helps me relax, and going to bed clean helps me get comfortable and fall asleep. I was exhausted, shaking, my skin felt like it was trying to turn itself inside out. I thought I just wanted or needed a solid night's sleep. So, my mom tells me to take a few shots of NyQuil, as that was all she had for sleep, and it has a bit of alcohol in it. I took 3 shots from the little plastic cup that came with the bottle and went to lay down. The NyQuil worked better than I hoped, and I fell asleep. That was Sunday night, which, other than the 1 drink my mom gave me on Saturday afternoon, was roughly 72 hours since I ran out of whiskey after a year of heavy daily use and 6 years of progressive alcoholism, which left me completely addicted and physically dependent. Sometime in the middle of Sunday night or Monday morning, I had gone into full-blown delirium tremens. Imagine a bad acid trip combined with the worst night terror nightmare you've ever had, but you can't wake up. I was stuck in this living hell in my head and had no consciousness to the real world. So, in the middle of the night, I got up and left my mother's house. In my head, I was running from people after me in this hell my mind was trapped in. According to the police report and hospital records, I was found about 4 blocks away behind a convenience store at approximately 8:30 a.m. Monday morning. I have no recollection of actual events, but in my delirium, these cops and paramedics were out to get me. My mom later told me that she was at the scene after I was found and convinced me to go in the ambulance, and she would follow right behind the ambulance to the hospital. I was taken to the hospital, heavily sedated, and admitted to the ICU. The delirium and hallucinations did not stop, and I was told I was extremely combative and would start screaming and trying to get up and run out of the hospital. I do remember partially regaining a bit of consciousness and my wrists and ankles were restrained. This sent me into terrifying rage as I thought the horrific delirious dreams I was stuck in had become my reality. I screamed and yelled out all my strength into trying to break out of the restraints to no avail. One of the nurses was at my side and told me I'd feel better in just a second. I didn't see a nurse in my mind. I saw someone evil with a syringe about to inject me with poison while I was strapped down. The delirium and hallucinations in my mind eventually stopped, and I was brought off medically induced coma on Friday morning, 1 week after waking up broke and out of booze. My poor mother was there by my side. She told me the doctor had told me there was a chance I may not make it, and if I would more than likely have permanent brain damage. At least my pain and suffering was only delirium in my mind. My mom spent the 5 days in real life wondering if her firstborn son will live or die, and whether I would ever be the same if I did make it. Luckily, I pulled through with flying colors. Doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. I'm very happy that you made it through this. I'm sorry for the things that led you to there, but with the support of good family, you're lucky. Some people aren't lucky, and they don't work. Had colon surgery and apparently almost died on the operating table. Then, while in the hospital recovering, both my kidneys stopped working for 36 hours and filled with fluid due to the complications during surgery. I had to get my DNR papers in order because they said my organs were most likely going to start shutting down at that moment. They tapped on to drain the fluids in hope of getting them working again. Needless to say, it worked, and I'm still here and healthy. Was young and dumb, riding a motorcycle too fast. Went wide on a turn, on a snaking road, and ended up going into some brush off the side of the road. I look up and see a telephone pole straight in front of me, and I'm heading right into it at 50 miles an hour. I have just enough time to think to myself, oh shit, and bam! I'm flying sideways with the bike behind me. Didn't really pass out, but definitely was disoriented, and realized I'd landed back on the road. The motorcycle is about 6 feet behind me on its side. Once I put myself together and got the bike standing up and off to the side, I retraced my tracks to see what happened. Sure enough, there's a line through the grass that's headed straight for this telephone pole, and then it suddenly goes off to the side about 15 yards from the pole. I reached down into the grass and found an old heavy-duty chain tensioner, the kind of thing you'd use to secure a big piece of equipment to a truck for transport. By the looks of it, I'd guess it had been sitting in that bush for at least a couple decades. Must have hit it right to push me off to the side. Complete dumb luck. If it hadn't been there, I know I couldn't have stopped in time and would have wrapped myself around that pole at 40 plus miles per hour. If it wouldn't have killed me instantly, I would have wished I were dead. As it were, I fractured a bone in my pinky and had a pretty sizable bruise on my hip and thigh. That chain tensioner came home with me and has been under my bed ever since. Some jackass that my father knew. For some reason, this fool decided it would be funny to push my pregnant mother down the stairs. What? When she landed, there was quite a lot of bleeding, and she was rushed to the hospital where doctors ran a battery of tests to make sure that she was okay. The doctors told my mother that she would have to have an abortion as the baby would be stillborn or suffer from intellectual disabilities. My mom wanted me to be born, thinking this was her last chance to have children, and she refused to have me aborted. I am 2 months shy of my 50th birthday, and I have 2 university degrees, so I think she made the right decision, and I fully support a woman's right to an abortion, in case anyone was wondering. Other things that have nearly killed me: automobiles, a school bus, and the wrong prescription. Claire's. I know it's a common no-no to go get your ears pierced at Claire's, but my parents wouldn't take me anywhere else. It was my 8th birthday, and I was getting my ears pierced at Claire's because I wanted sparkly earrings like all of my friends. I should have noticed the red flags. No gloves, piercing guns, chair on display to everyone in the shop, and outside, it was by the window. I did indeed not care about those things since, well, I was 8 and stupid. So they pierced the ear, and I didn't even flinch. I don't even know how, because apparently they got plastic stuck in my ear. Not only that, the front and backs were different materials. Naturally, the metals reacted and my ears got infected. Massive abscesses. I think that's what it's called, formed on the back of my ears, and eventually I had to go to the hospital where doctors used crocodile clip thingies to remove them. That didn't work. Quite frankly, it made them worse. I ended up getting them surgically removed. I was not a fan of that idea, being a child who had just got their dream earrings. Never got to wear those, by the way. Still salty about that. But If I had left it in any longer, I probably would have died. So yeah, I got them out, and they actually gave me back my earrings with all like the pus and body fluids and stuff. Don't get your ears pierced at Claire's, kids. Now, I'm sure you sign some type of waiver when you go to a place like Claire's, but there has to be some culpability for this, right? I mean, that is very dangerous. Don't go to Claire's. This needs some setup. I was married once upon a time, but the marriage ended under very abrupt, very tragic circumstances. 6 months after my wedding, my wife was killed in a car accident. I was 21 at the time and newly able to buy booze. One morning, I nearly drowned in it. My best friend came to my rental home in the morning as we had planned to go to IHOP together. When I didn't answer the door, she walked around the outside of the building, peering into my bedroom door. She was able to make out the state that I was in, and with the help of one of my neighbors at the time, they kicked my front door down. She drove me to the hospital while my neighbor stayed to take care of my brother's dog, who I was babysitting at the time while he was on vacation. To answer the question of how I survived, my best friend saved my life. It wasn't long after that we realized we were in love. We're getting married in 2 weeks at the time of writing this. Congrats. This is a bit of a weird story that I just remembered, but electricity. As context, I'm on the high school's robotics team. It was after a competition during cleanup. I was the only person in the cafeteria that was used as pits for teams. I was cleaning up a few things my team had left. One of those was a power strip. Not a normal power strip, a super long one. I forgot how many outlets it had on it, but it was like at least 12. Naturally, something like that required a lot of power. My plan was to unplug the strip, pull it onto the table, then unplug everything from it and put the cords away. I was laying on the floor so I could reach under the table, and I started pulling the cord out of the wall outlet. At some point, while the prongs were halfway out of the outlet, my fingers made connection with them and completed a circuit right through my body. I don't really know how to describe the feeling. It was super effing weird. It didn't exactly sting, more of a very intense buzzing and tingling, but I remember my entire arm just locked up and I couldn't ungrip my hand. There was still electricity passing through me and it was hurting a bit, but I still couldn't get my hand to let go. After a couple seconds, I just used my legs and kicked away as hard as I could. I smacked my head pretty hard on the table, but it got my hand off the prongs. After getting free, I just laid on the floor for a few minutes, thinking of how close that was. Had an appendicitis back in June this year, which led to an E. coli infection in my blood. At first, it felt like bowel issues. Then I started feeling weak and kind of sick. Hoped it was something that would go away on its own, but after about 2 weeks, it didn't get better, so I ended up going to the hospital. Turns out, it was an appendicitis and an E. coli infection. Doc said if I waited any longer, I probably would have died. They treated my E. coli with antibiotics and an IV, and monitored my appendicitis till I cleared up on its own without surgery. They said I couldn't get surgery to remove my appendix at the time since my platelets were pretty low and needed to be at least 100K to qualify for a safe surgery. They only went up as high as 36K. I also had an enlarged spleen, which may have been causing other issues with my blood work. Luckily, the enlarged spleen and appendicitis cleared up on their own without surgical intervention and went home a week later after they did a bone marrow biopsy and checked my vitals and did another blood test. There is a large tunnel near my house. It's usually used for draining a creek nearby, but the creek hasn't been full in years. It's completely dried up, so kids would walk around the tunnel, spray paint it, and do drugs and stuff like that. Me and my group of friends would always go in there to sing because the acoustics were good. Just yesterday, we were singing in the tunnel again when a group of 6 to 7 teenage boys came down into the tunnel as well. We were friendly and said hi, and we didn't think anything of them going to the opposite side of the tunnel. We had stopped singing and were just making casual conversation as we watched the group of flashlights fade to the other side of the tunnel. At some point, we noticed they stopped walking and did a full 180. The group started running full speed at us. We should have been scared and ran out of the tunnel, but we decided against it and just stood there while they ran past us. I assumed they were trying to scare us, but similar scenarios had happened to me before in there. It was getting late, so we decided to grab our speaker and head home. We were goofing around as we walked out and played Michael Jackson's Bad, basically strutting our way out of the tunnel. We suddenly heard the group of boys start laughing. One of the ones closer to the front pushed a button or something, and a huge explosion crackled throughout the tunnel. Because of the echo, it was twice as loud as it should have been. Me and all my friends went momentarily deaf. I was closer to the explosion, and the blast pushed me back up against a wall. We were all in shock for a moment, and gathered ourselves before sprinting out of the tunnel at full speed. We had to read each other's lips for a minute, and when I gained my sense of hearing, first I immediately called the cops. When they showed up, they had a quick look around the tunnel. One of the cops happened to work in a mine, so he looked around the area of the explosion. He told us that if we were any closer to the explosion site, we would have been seriously injured or killed. So I guess in the end, if we weren't strutting out of the tunnel, we could have died, but strutting is faster than walking. Thank you, Michael Jackson. Well, we all know how Michael Jackson liked helping kids. Playing hide and seek in the attic with my brother and sister. Fell through the floor and slammed my head onto the concrete floor. Don't remember anything clearly until about a week later. What I do remember, my mom says never happened. I clearly remember waking up a few hours later when my sister told me dinner was ready, sitting down for a few minutes before deciding I wasn't hungry and going back to bed. My mom says I never woke up. How did I survive? Modern medicine, I suppose, and sheer will, because I just wanted to get back home to play my Nintendo. Drunk driver T-boned me in the driver's side, Pontiac Sunbird at 50 miles per hour with his Cadillac Eldorado. Ripped the rear axle right off the car and pulled the roof down by collapsing the B-pillar. The seatbelt kept me in the car, but the shoulder strap also was attached to the B-pillar. I regained consciousness just long enough to realize that I could not breathe as the seatbelt was lodged under my ribcage. As the tunnel vision started to close, I saw a man winding up to hit me in the face with his fist. I finally felt some of the pain subside as my right hand managed to squeeze the seatbelt buckle hard enough to release the belt. After a few labored breaths, I saw two men struggling next to me. The drunk driver was trying to attack me because I wrecked his car. The person in the car behind me saw the whole thing, stopped to help, and held the guy back, likely saving my life. The drunk driver was a local attorney who had numerous drunk driving arrests and accidents, was well known to the police, and got off with a few hours of community service. I got a severe concussion, a few days of anterograde amnesia, nightmares, no way to get to work, and not all of my bills paid by insurance. So yeah, I'm pretty much against impaired driving.